In this video, I will try to cover the Battle of Kursk, which represents an important turning point in Second World War. Although Germany and the USSR signed an agreement in 1939 about non-aggression and cooperation, Hitler was preparing an invasion of the USSR. That operation was named Barbarossa and began in 1941 when the Eastern Front opened. The battles of Kursk was preceded by big battles like the one for Moscow and Stalingrad. In the Battle of Kursk, 50 divisions, of which 14 armored and 2 motorized, were engaged on the German side. A total of about 800,000 soldiers, 2,700 tanks and self-propelled artillery, 10,000 guns and mortars, with the support of about 2,000 aircraft. On the Soviet side, 12 armies were engaged, of which 2 were armored. The Russians had a certain numerical superiority in manpower and weapons, 20,000 guns and mortars, 920 rocket launchers called Katyusha, 3,600 tanks, supported by 2,400 aircraft. The attack planned in the north from the direction of Orella was led by Field Marshal Walter Model. It was also commanded by Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge. Attack in the south from the direction of Belgorod, led by Generals Hermann Hoth and Franz Kempf. Wehrmacht forces launched an attack on July 5, 1943, with simultaneous attacks in the north and south of the ledge near Kursk. With the help of an extensive spy network, the Soviets knew the exact hour of the attack, therefore, they opened artillery fire on the enemy as a precaution. That's had the most psychological effect due to demoralizing the enemy before the actual battle. In addition, the Germans were forced to postpone the attack for several hours due to the intensity of the bombing. Stalin ordered the Air Force of the Red Army to bomb the airfield because then the planes are most vulnerable, full of fuel and ammunition, without the possibility of returning fire. German forces, thanks to the new radar system, were warned of the bombing, so the Soviets did not have expected result of destroying aircrafts. Now the Germans were sure that their attack was not surprise for the enemy, but the operation was in full swing and the possibility of further delay was off. Right from the beginning of the operation, it was obvious that the Soviets were well prepared for attack. Wehrmacht forces made slow progress towards their objectives. Their losses were big due to anti-personnel mines that the Soviets had planned in preparation for the invasion. By 9 o'clock in the morning, the Germans had advanced only 5 kilometers in the north interior. For the first wave of attacks in the north, Model sent 9 infantry divisions and 1 panzer division made up of Tiger and Elephant tanks. His plan was to tire out the Soviet defense by periodically sending fresh units into battle. He predicted that the first wave of attacks advance about 16 kilometers inland. By 9 o'clock in the morning, the Germans are in the north advanced only 5 kilometers inland, which was much less than expected. The Wehrmacht forces in the north have reached the town of Panayrai, and because of this, the commander defense in the north, General Konstantin Rokossovsky, sent 2 anti-tank brigades 25, supported by 350 aircraft, an artillery brigade and a mortar brigade. Advancement the Wehrmacht was stopped with the help of artillery and minefields, through which the soldiers had difficulty broke through. German armored divisions were in front of the town of Maloarkhangelsk, but they stopped due to the quick intervention of Soviet engineers who laid about 6,000 new mines at the entrance to the city. In some places, German units would break deeper into the interior where the defenses were weaker, but would quickly be surrounded by Soviet soldiers and cut off from supply and communication lines and would be defeated. Towards the end of the first day of the operation, attack onto the north advanced only 8 kilometers inland, with heavy losses. 20% panzer unit and 20,000 men were lost. The attack in the south was led by Generals Hermann Hoth and Franz Kempf, whose goal was reach the town of Aboyan by July 6. In the first attack, they sent 3 panzer divisions that attacked from 3 different directions and 2 infantry divisions. With great effort, the Germans succeeded break through 2 Soviet lines of defense. By 7 o'clock they managed to break through 5 kilometers in inland, but then terrain turned to mud, causing the armored divisions to slow down. As well as onto the north, the Soviets used anti-personnel and anti-tank mines. That also slowed down enemy advance. In the first wave of attacks in the south, about 36 panzer tanks were destroyed. When they got through the minefields, a new attack was planned with 3 SS panzer divisions that were supposed to advance towards the town of Bykovka. The armored divisions soon came under fire Katyusha, Soviet multi-barrel rocket launchers. Despite the efforts of the Red Army, they had to withdraw from the town of Bykovka around 4 p.m. After the first day, the German forces advanced about 20 kilometers inland. Better progress on the southern battlefield can be linked to better equipment armored divisions and with a larger number of motorized infantry divisions. Wehrmacht forces in the first 2 days of fighting on the southern front managed to destroy about 850 Soviet tanks. Until July 11, the Soviets suffered great losses in machinery and manpower, so they had to activate reservists who were ready in the hinterland. Stalin planned a counteroffensive, but it failed due to the lack of tanks. Due to the greater success of the Wehrmacht in the south, the Soviets had to go there concentrate most of their forces, so they could not plan a counteroffensive in the north. Attack onto the north, it concentrated around the town of Panayrai, and Model hoped that it would be easier to advance towards Kursk when that area is captured. On the 7th of July, the battle near the village of Soborovka followed, included more than 2,000 armored vehicles from both sides. Despite the large number of tanks and other armored vehicles that the Germans used that day, they failed to break through the Soviet defenses. The model now tried to change tactics by stretching the line of attack over a larger area, hoping to find a weak spot in the Soviet defenses. On July 8th, Model deployed the divisions in 3 groups towards the city of Teploy, Alkovaka, and Panayra, but failed to advance more than a few kilometers. In the south, the 2nd SS Panzer Division continues to advance in a northern direction, and Vatutinov forces have a hard time resisting that elite armored division. In addition, Hoth has a lot of support from the Luftwaffe, and because of this, it can progress quickly. Kempf's role was to protect the flanks of Hoth's divisions they progressed, but due to weaker progress and not so much support from the Luftwaffe, the Kempf divisions were behind. After 6 days of fighting, the 9th Army's attack in the north led by Walter Model succeeded and occupied 12 kilometers of Soviet territory. To prevent the Germans, Nikolai Vatutin requested additional help from reservists. The 27th Army and the 4th Tank Corps moved to Kursk. The 53rd Army and the Mechanized Infantry Corps occupied the areas southeast of Kursk, while the 5th Infantry Army occupied the area between Aboyan and Prokhorovka. The climax of Operation Citadel occurred on July 12 when the 4th Panzer Army advanced towards the north and met the Soviet 5th Tank Army west of the city Prokhorovka. The attack resulted in the largest tank battle in the history of warfare. In total, 1,400 tanks were engaged, 800 Soviet against 600 German. Soviet strategy was to reduce the distance between the enemy and get as close as possible so that the Germans could not take advantage long-range cannons. The battle lasted 8 hours and ended in a draw, but in a strategic sense it was a big blow for Germany. Then the second phase of the Battle of Kursk began. The offensive ability of the Germans was destroyed, and they will be in constant retreat from then on. In the next few days, the Germans are still there attacking around the city of Prokhorovka, but due to a lack of funds and resources they could not advance further north. In addition, on July 10th, Hitler ordered the withdrawal of the army on July 13th because of the danger from the capitulation of Italy. On July 9th, the Allies invaded Sicily, which is why Hitler had to stop the Citadel operation in order to be able to transfer the army from the Eastern Front to the West. Von Manstein tried to dissuade Hitler from such a decision by arguing that the army would from the East come too late to the West, and by then Italy will have already capitulated and that this will not affect the outcome. Von Manstein believed that the attack in the south could still succeed and that the Citadel operation should not be interrupted because the Soviets had few men and tanks in reserve. Due to the lack of tanks, the 4th Panzer Army and Kempf's Auxiliary Army began to retreat on July 16th. During the defensive phase, the Soviet forces fulfilled their tasks, repulsed the Germans' attacks, and destroyed most of the German reserves. SS Panzer Corps, the most elite units of the Eastern Front, which consisted of 3 divisions, had only 1 at the end of the Citadel operation and 183 out of 425 tanks. The Soviets claimed that around 70,000 German officers and soldiers had been killed and that around 3,000 tanks were destroyed. A combination of defensive zones, well-placed reserves, good equipment and training of the Soviet soldiers, and the Allied landing in Sicily led to the collapse of the Wehrmacht on the Eastern Front. Field Marshal von Manstein attributed the defeat at Kursk as a tactical failure. The biggest problem was the constant transfer of German forces in search of a weak point in the Soviet defense. However, Soviet preparedness for attack also played a decisive role in this operation. Thanks to a spy network, the Soviets already knew when and how the Wehrmacht would attack the ledge near Kursk and were able to prepare for battle. They studied every flaw of the German attacks and their tanks. The production of the legendary T-34 tank gave the Soviets a great advantage in mechanization and armor. While the Soviets produced simple and reliable tanks that were customized in the field, the Germans constructed complicated tanks that would often break down and therefore be ineffective against superior Soviet tanks. Soviet warfare tactics were also of great importance. They decided on a defensive war in which they would tire the enemy without taking advantage of their reserves. German warfare tactics were based on blitzkrieg, fast and lightning war, and this way the Germans conquered the whole West. Such a tactic did not prove itself good because of the large Soviet territory for which German logistics were not ready. The Battle of Kursk was a disaster for the Wehrmacht. The Germans lost too many men, tanks, and resources and could not complete Operation Citadel as well as Operation Barbarossa. The Battle of Kursk, along with the Battle of Stalingrad, is the first real turning point in the war on the Eastern Front, which will mark the downfall of the Third Reich. Hey guys, thank you for watching. If you like the video and want to support me in my future work, press the like button and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.